practically speaking, is so many state legislators assume that currency reform, alternative currency, or competing currencies, whatever we're going to call it, is not something within the ken of the state government.
They're just not informed.
Right, it's something reserved. The Federal Reserve is supposed to handle this. U.S. Treasury is supposed to handle this. We in the state aren't supposed to handle this. First thing is to point out that, well, here's the Constitution. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin, tender, and debts. Here are these Supreme Court decisions. Here's the ability for you to do it within the context of your legal authority. Here's your legal duty to do something like this, because ultimately you have what's called the police power, which is designed to protect the health, safety, and welfare, economic as well as medical or what have you, of the population. So you have the duty. If you have the constitutional authority, there's a practical way for you to do it, and if you wait, you're not going to get the kind of action you expect out of Washington. In fact, it's probably going to be more of the same or worse. So this problem's not going away. And you people at the state legislature, you have the responsibility. And the question I ask them, Virginia, for instance, I was talking to some Virginia legislators a while ago, I said, if the Federal Reserve System collapses, we go into some kind of hyperinflationary event where the currency becomes next to worthless, what will the Commonwealth of Virginia, as far as its government, and what will the citizens of Virginia use as their currency? And then you see the little light bulb go on in their head, because they realize, well, there isn't anything else. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen? Oh. And then the next step is, well, it's up to you. Right? You're in the legislature. You've taken this responsibility politically. You're holding yourself out to the public as having the competence. Now let's see the prudence.
And given the backdrop of, continuing financial problems, not just in the United States, but globally, it's giving people the understanding that they need to act, to have that backup safety net just in case?
Mm-hmm. I think so. And, when we talk about competing currencies, as I like to say, any little girl in Bangladesh that walks by an internet cafe and looks in the window can see people all over the world talking about competition in currencies, alternatives to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve no longer the world reserve currency, whatever. They have all sorts of different ideas, but they're all in synchronization on that particular fact. Something has to be done. Russia, China, South Africa, run down the list of these countries, Brazil, right? Why aren't we thinking about it here domestically? Mm-hmm. This is, as it were, the eye of the storm. Right? This is the focal point. This is our Federal Reserve System.
Well, what's happening internationally, in my view, is people are thinking about it and they're seeing gold reemerging as a form of currency.
That's right.
That's their protection against, what they see as the potential or probable collapse of the dollar at some point in time if the U.S. government doesn't get off of this road of more debt and more deficits and put some discipline on spending. So if people are seeing that internationally, isn't it sort of logical that the state governments should also be seeing gold and silver as the natural alternative?
Well, that's the point I make to them, especially given that there's the Constitution. And what does the Constitution say with respect to their reserve power?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, I know you've written an awful lot about the constitutional authorities for state militias. What is the link between militias and sound money, constitutional sound money and constitutional militias?
Well, the purpose ultimately of the constitutional militia is to maintain every form of what we call today homeland security within each state. And then the militia have certain duties to the national government if they're called forth by Congress. Leave that aside. But certainly within each state. And one aspect of homeland security has to be economic security. If you don't have a sound economy, forget everything else, right? You're down the drain. What we don't have in any state today is a militia structured the way the Constitution really requires. So I have been promoting that revitalization across the board because there are a number of things that need to be done. But one of them, of course, is economic security. And the reason I promote the militia for that is if we had a constitutional militia, every member of it could be required to have one of these alternative currency accounts as part of his militia homeland security duty.
Preparation.
Just in
case.
Right? He wouldn't necessarily have to use it if he didn't want to use it, but he'd have to have it. And secondly, of course, you have the businessmen. They're all members of the militia too, and they would be required after some number of days, after the system was up and running, to post alternative prices for their goods and services in the alternative currency. Once again, they and their customers would not necessarily have to use it, although I suspect they would start using it pretty soon, but there it would be. And my estimate is that if you pass one of these statutes, within 60 to 90 days, you could have all of this set up. The institutional structure would be there. If people wanted to use it, fine. If they didn't, that's fine too. But I expect that the circumstances would be such that they'd start using it pretty quickly. And then if you have competition between sound currency and a rotting vegetable currency, if you will, well, Gresham's law is going to work in reverse, right?
Yeah, the good money will drive
Good
out
money
the
will
bad.
drive the bad money out of circulation, and then this will put pressure, because I don't want to abolish the Federal Reserve, I think that's a much too complicated problem, but it will put pressure on the banking system and on Congress to restructure their act. Because now the states and the population of the states, and what's that? That's the total population of the country ultimately, right? Other than the District of Columbia, they can walk away from the Federal Reserve System. So this is going to be tremendous pressure on that system and on Congress to straighten up their act.
Well, let's go back, because I think this ties into the point we were talking about earlier, separation of church and state, separation of bank and state. Is this how you see separation of bank and state evolving?
Well, I certainly see separation of currency and bank, if you will, right? We're going to have an official currency of gold and silver. We're not going to be using this debt currency coming out of some kind of banking
Because after all, Congress has the power to coin, they don't have the power to print.
Right?
According
So
to
they don't have the power to delegate some kind of power to a banking cartel made up of private
Yeah,
interests.
if they don't have the power themselves, they can't
No,
delegate.
they can't delegate. That's obvious. All right. Well, we can't control them, so we'll put the reform in at the state level. I think that what you would then see developing in the states is a different type of banking system, one that uses the alternative currency, probably one that will generate bankers' acceptances so you can have that short-term credit that's necessary to maintain the economy.
Banking in the traditional sense.
Yeah, banking in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And with a scientifically based monetary standard. Right? Because an ounce of gold is an ounce of gold is an ounce of gold wherever you are
Right.
in the world, right?
Which is essentially very important, because that provides the means of communication, economic calculation, which is the basis of society, when we go into the marketplace to fulfill our needs and wants.
And I don't see how you can have a structure of rational economic calculation with a non-rational monetary unit.
Which is what we have.
Which is what we have now.
Yeah.
We have a debt-based political money, which by hypothesis is non-rational because it's driven by all sorts of political interests that have no eventual tie-in back to the marketplace. There's no actual link, unbreakable link. Whereas gold and silver, there's the unit, there's the market tie, there's the element of rationality as far as we can get it within a market system.
So this actually, addresses the point that I think a lot of people in the country intuitively understand, that the monetary system as it exists today serves the interest of certain powers, but doesn't serve the broad sweep of the nation, and surely not the middle class, who really don't understand necessarily what's going on in terms of the debasement of the currency.
I think that's correct. I think our major problem over the years has been the loss of what I would call the aperceptive historical mass of knowledge about money and banking, and then the willingness of people, almost robotic, to accept ideas, directives, propaganda coming out of Washington. But of course now the screw is being turned economically, and there's that old saying attributed, I think, to Samuel Johnson. Nothing focuses a man's mind more than his impending hanging, right?